These 8 celebrities were booted off The Tonight Show after just one appearance. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show was a regular ritual for Americans for 30 years. Here is where legends were born, careers were shaped, and cultural discourse was born. An unheralded comedian may become a household name in an instant, or a performer could solidify their position in entertainment history with one appearance on Carson's sofa. Danes, be careful. Hey mom, come over here. Bye my dear. Sending you a big kiss. Apologies, but not every appearance by Carson was a smashing success. He had remarkably little patience for guests who disobeyed his unspoken ground rules, strict boundaries, and an extremely professional air about him, which made him the most trusted figure on television. During the 1970s, a former NBC executive who was close with Johnny Carson shared that Johnny had very particular expectations for how visitors should act. You won't get another opportunity to cross those lines, whether by being disrespectful, acting inappropriately, or just failing to grasp the tempo of the performance. Johnny had an extensive memory, and he held grudges that would never go away. Here we reveal 8 famous people that utterly failed Johnny Carson, the ultimate faux pas. Many of these artists, including both well-known names and up-and-coming stars, had their careers severely damaged when Carson abruptly removed them from future appearances after only one. Was an autograph left behind? Give him any task you want. As of right now, I'm not willing to settle for that. Permit the bird to relieve itself, so what? But before we go into that, let's figure out why our first entry was such a shocking failure. Even the unflappable Johnny Carson lost control of his show during this very provocative performance, which went down in late-night television history as a watershed moment. Very much music, thank you. The one who went too far was Andy Kaufman, as Tony Clifton. The reservation appears simple at first glance. In 1979, Tony Clifton, a nightclub singer known for his rough comedic style, would make an appearance on The Tonight Show. Clifton was a creation of comedian Andy Kaufman, meant to provoke viewers and shake up the entertainment industry. This was something the bookers failed to completely grasp, despite prior warnings. An aide on set who saw the now infamous appearance noted that Carson's crew knew Kaufman would be playing Clifton, but they were confused about what that signified. They were hoping for a character, but instead got pure mayhem. The catastrophe started the second Clifton stepped foot in the studio. He was visibly intoxicated, albeit his whiskey bottle contained water, and aggressive toward studio employees, which led to an immediate escalation of tension backstage. Carson tried to set some ground rules for the appearance during his famous pre-show chats with guests, but Clifton paid him no mind at all. Johnny tried to get a sense of what Tony was planning, recalled a talent coordinator who was there that day. Disaster unfolded in real time as the program began, but Clifton simply puffed cigar smoke in his face and assured Johnny, "Don't worry about it. Clifton's got this covered." Carson's face went white, and that alone would have been enough to have most people banned. Clifton proceeded to play Olar in an egregiously bad manner, with lyrical errors and skipped notes. A woman in the front row was scolded by Clifton mid-song, as the unease in the audience increased. Carson tried to step in, but Clifton interrupted him and said, "I'll handle this." "Junior?" The turning point occurred when Clifton hurled a glass of water at Doc Severson, the musical director, because he was obviously unhappy with the band's accompaniment. Carson abruptly turned to commercial as his once iconic composure finally faded. Clifton had been taken from the premises during the break, and he was nowhere to be seen when the program resumed. A stagehand who was there during the ejection said that security had to physically remove him. "Do you know who I am?" he yelled out continuously. Furious was Carson. His one and only expletive was, "Get that exploive out of my building and make sure he never comes back." After that, the ban was fast and unwavering. Tony Clifton would never be seen again, and Carson's crew would implement new pre-in protocols to forestall future occurrences of this kind. To make matters more ironic, Kaufman was not first banned. Even though Carson could tell Kaufman was playing a different role, their connection deteriorated as Kaufman's controversial approach developed. One of the show's writers mentioned that Johnny valued dedication to a bit, no matter how unpleasant. Clifton went too far, too, and showed disrespect instead of provoking. Johnny had complete authority over Carson's show and Carson's regulations. It was intolerable that Clifton directly questioned that authority. Night Live a few years back, and you truly shone in that role. I am grateful. Enjoyed myself. To be honest, I've never done a talk show before. A close second is Madonna, the one that Carson found unappealing. By 1987, Madonna had solidified her position as music's dominant provocateur through her provocative music videos, successful albums, and meticulously crafted persona of alternative sexuality. The producers of The Tonight Show were hoping for an interview that would make headlines when they booked her. Instead, they got an uncomfortable discussion that Carson was clearly counting down the days until it was over. When Madonna arrived, she carried herself as if the show were fortunate to have her. As one of the episode's production coordinators recalled, the fact that she treated Johnny like a local TV personality who ought to be thankful for her visit was insulting to Johnny, who had interviewed everyone from presidents to movie legends. Madonna didn't even get to the couch when the trouble started. Carson was known to be very prompt, so it irritated her that she allegedly kept him waiting on stage. Viewers couldn't help but notice something as soon as the interview started. Carson, who is normally quite supple, was rigid, while Madonna exuded an air of tense energy and purposeful disinterest. According to a cameraman who was on set that night, it was awkward right from the start. The responses that Madonna provided were brief and somewhat indifferent. After giving Carson a deep inquiry, she would utter no more than a few sentences before staring at him in silence. He was clearly thinking, "I've got 6 more minutes to fill with someone who won't talk." Things reached a flashpoint when Carson, in an effort to establish common ground, joked about how they were both famous. As a response, Madonna delivered what one reporter called this rehearsed bit about how Carson had no idea what it was like to be famous. A palpable sense of unease descended over the studio as Carson's smile hardened. Johnny had done interviews with Sinatra, the Beatles, and Elvis. True cultural phenomena, as pointed out by the talent coordinator of the show. It didn't sit well with him when someone he thought was just this month's flavor gave him a lecture about fame. He seemed to lose interest in the interview after that comment. No visible symptoms of discontent were evident as Carson, ever the professional, finished the section. On the other hand, he spoke himself clearly backstage. "Well, she was certainly everything we hoped for, wasn't she?" Johnny commented to his producer as the cameras stopped rolling, using his signature dry, sarcastic tone that conveyed his anger. There was never an official ban on Madonna. Although Carson never made such clear statements, word got out to the booking staff that she would not be invited back while he was in charge. A member of staff once said, "Johnny had a mental list of people who had disappointed him on air. Once you were on that list, you stayed there." With just one appearance, Madonna soared to the top. Madonna made a triumphant return as a guest on The Tonight Show under Jay Leno's leadership several years later. Reports indicate that Leno brought up her prior visit with Carson during the pre-show small talk. According to a production assistant present, Madonna's response was telling, "Yeah, he didn't get me. I was too real for him." The comment made its way back to Carson, who had retained office space at NBC, supposedly prompting him to remark, "Too real." That would have been refreshing. Let us go among them. Would you like to beat up a cleaning lady first or something? Number 3, Robert Blake, the combative guest who crossed a line. Robert Blake had built a respectable career as both a former child star, our gang comedies, and a serious adult actor. The popular 1970s TV series Beretta before his 1981 appearance on The Tonight Show. What should have been a standard promotional appearance for his film, Secondhand Hearts, instead became an uncomfortable confrontation that ensured Blake would never return to Carson's couch. Blake came in with a chip on his shoulder the size of Mount Rushmore, recalled a producer who worked on the episode. He had this intensity that made everyone uncomfortable right from the start. The pre-in kept saying he didn't want to talk about the usual promotional crap, but no one expected him to be quite so hostile on air. When Blake joined Carson on the couch, viewers quickly sensed something was wrong. Rather than engaging in the light conversation typical of the show, Blake launched into a series of complaints about Hollywood, the studio system, and the indignities of having to promote projects. Carson, attempting to steer the conversation back to familiar territory, Asked about Blake's experiences working with director Hal Ashby on his new film, Blake basically ignored the question and went off on this tangent about how actors were treated like commodities, explained a writer who was present. Johnny tried to lighten the mood with a joke, and Blake cut him off with, "I'm not here to be funny. I'm here to tell the truth." The audience got really quiet. You didn't interrupt Carson's jokes on his own show. The tension escalated when Carson, still trying to salvage the segment, mentioned Blake's background as a child actor. Blake responded with an unexpectedly dark monologue about the exploitation of child performers, using language that was unusually graphic for network television at that time. When Carson tried to interject, Blake reportedly said, "Let me finish. You get to talk every night." You could see Johnny's face change, the producer continued. He had this tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. People who knew him recognized it immediately. Blake had just guaranteed he'd never be invited back. Carson, the consummate professional, completed the segment without obvious signs of anger. But backstage, he made his feelings clear. According to multiple sources, he told his producer simply, "No return engagement necessary for Mr. Blake." The instruction was understood and followed. Blake was quietly removed from the list of potential guests for the remainder of Carson's tenure. What made Blake's banning particularly significant was that his career was at a vulnerable point. Beretta had ended, and he was attempting to transition to film roles. The Tonight Show was a crucial promotional platform that could help introduce him to a new audience. Being shut out of Carson's show limited his visibility at a critical career juncture. Years later, a Tonight Show staffer who had been present for the appearance observed, "In retrospect, Blake's combative attitude during that interview seems almost prophetic given his later legal troubles." Carson sensed at a way the presence of evil and rage. Johnny was incredibly perceptive about human behavior. He was averse to become involved since he felt something was wrong with Blake. "One area where I excel, namely tap dancing, is where he falls short. It was on your show that I first saw him tap dance." "Do you recall?" "Yes, I understand." "Yes, he did." "Yeah, can you tap dance more gracefully than him?" "Sure, I'm better at it than he is." Put Truman Capote at number 4. That look that was too drunk to be on TV. The literary genius and quick wit that made Truman Capote famous in the United States were on full display during his many appearances on The Tonight Show in the 60s and 70s, but when he left in 1975, Carson was in a bind, so he secretly made sure Capo wouldn't be back for a long time. An enigmatic production assistant from that evening recalled that Capo had shown up visibly drunk. Alcohol wasn't the only thing. His movements were disorganized and he spoke with a stutter. The producers were debating whether to scrap the piece altogether, but Carson ultimately decided to go forward with it. At the start of the episode, viewers could tell something was off because he had said, "He's Truman Capote. Let's see if I can guide him through this." It appeared as though Capote lost his train of thought multiple times, slumped in his chair and had trouble completing phrases. As Capote's answers became more fragmented, Carson summoned all his interviewing chops to try to piece together a discussion. According to an on-set director, Johnny was giving a clinic in live TV damage control. In order to formulate new inquiries, he would paraphrase parts of Truman's responses. When Truman began to ramble, he would finish his thoughts. While Capo seemed to be continuing to participate, he was essentially conducting both sides of the interview. Anger and indiscretion flared up when Capo started making baseless and possibly libelous claims about the personal lives of other celebrities. Carson deftly shifted the conversation away from the gossip after seeing the ethical and legal risks, but Capote refused to let up. An on-site stage manager made the comment, "You could see Johnny getting increasingly concerned about the performance." As soon as Capote began to level accusations and name-calling, Johnny signaled to the control booth to end the situation. Unlike with most important guests, he stopped the segment a few minutes early. Capote wasn't banned indefinitely like a few of our other submissions. Carson distinguished between a persistently annoying person and a gifted individual experiencing an off night. However, Capote was essentially given a cooling-off period of several years, during which he was not called back, which was treated as an unofficial timeout. Talent coordinator from that era said that Carson instructed the booking staff, "Let's give Truman some time to get himself together." It wasn't a lifetime ban, but it was a clear message that Carson wouldn't risk another train wreck like that on his show. Tragically, Capote never got himself together. Carson may have thought about inviting him back in the late 1970s, when his addiction was at its worst. Capote's condition has worsened dramatically. He never got back on the Tonight Show couch before he passed away in 1984. Carson changed how she dealt with possibly problematic guests after the Capote incident. There are now clearer procedures for canceling parts and stricter pre-ins if guests arrive in a way that could ruin the presentation. It was easy to follow Johnny's rule after Capote, as pointed out by one producer. They shouldn't be giving the interview tonight if tomorrow's details are a complete mystery to them. Looking at us now, 2 years later, I can say with certainty that I've never liked you. To hell with it. You are now the master. Yes, I understand. I know exactly how much money you have in the bank, and I'm about to take it all away from you. So I'm not in a good position right now. Fifth on the list is Don Rickles. Don Rickles became famous as the trader of poison, who spared no one from his acerbic barbs, and he built his career on insult humor. This was when the insult comic crossed the line. The format of his appearances on Jimmy Fallon's show was predictable. Carson would play the role of the ideal straight guy, appearing hurt, but obviously relishing the act, as Rickles would cruelly ridicule her. The crowd would erupt in laughter, because they were both familiar with the unspoken norms of their on-air dynamic. This comedic chemistry was a success. It was implicitly recognized that Rickles could make fun of Carson's hosting style, show, and appearance, but certain parts of Carson's private life were taboo. Rickles stepped into that gray area in a single disastrous appearance in the early 1970s, causing a schism that briefly removed him off The Tonight Show. According to a writer who was involved with the show during this time, Rickles and Carson had incredible chemistry. However, there were limits that not even Rickles was to surpass. There could be no discussion of Johnny's divorce or alimony payments. Johnny expected complete secrecy when it came to matters pertaining to his private life. The audience loved it when Rickles, as usual, made fun of Carson during the presentation in question. Rickles, though, poked fun at Carson's recent divorce and the large sum of alimony he was paying his ex-wife as the episode was coming to a close. The studio audience chuckled, but Carson's close friends and family observed a dramatic shift in his attitude. A camera operator recalled that for an instant Johnny's smile disappeared entirely. He got well fast. Rickles had just crossed a boundary, but nobody on the crew noticed. Most viewers certainly didn't either. Unlike his normal act, Carson's anger was genuine. Carson completed the piece with an air of professionalism, but he was quite vocal about his disapproval backstage. Reportedly, he did not outright prohibit Rickles, but he did tell his booking staff, "Let's give Dawn some time off." This was interpreted as a euphemism for Rickles' impending exclusion from future engagements. It was only temporary. According to a producer at that time, Johnny had too much respect for Rickles to do that. However, that time served as a necessary pause. Since Rickles had been a regular on the show before to his suspension, his career took a major hit while he was out for over a year. The story's satisfying conclusion is its most appealing aspect. Longtime Carson producer Fred Dordova claims that Rickles knew he had crossed a line and wanted to apologize, but he didn't know how to confront Carson head-on. In typical Rickles flair, the remedy was delivered through comedy. Carson wasn't on the D's, but he was there to watch Rickles perform at a roast of Dean Martin. Suddenly, Rickles pointed to Carson in the crowd and proclaimed, "I'm not afraid of you." "Okay, I'm a little afraid of you. Please let me back on the show." The public acknowledgement, delivered in Rickles' famous way, seemed to break the ice. That made Johnny laugh out loud. Afterwards, Dordova remembered. After the event, he told me, "I think Don's been in exile long enough. Let's have him back." Rickles went back to being a favorite guest on The Tonight Show during Carson's tenure, though he supposedly made sure not to bring up Carson's personal life again. An essential facet of Carson's character was exposed by Rickles' brief coma. Off-screen, he expected others to respect his limits, which he enforced firmly, despite his warm and friendly demeanor on camera. Not even his closest pals in the entertainment industry were spared from his demands. Anyway, tomorrow night is significant. Excuse me, just a moment. Here is number 6, mine. the one and only Chevy Chase, the departing guest host. As the late 1970s came to a close, Chevy Chase was enjoying a meteoric rise to stardom, having broken out on Saturday Night Live and starring in successful films like Foul Play. Chase appeared to be the obvious pick to stand in for Carson as a guest host in 1977, when he took one of his frequent vacations from The Tonight Show. Hip, youthful, and well-versed in live TV. However, after that 1 week as a guest host, Chase had no interest in returning to Carson's show in any way. Chevy showed up with the mentality that he had supplanted Carson as the most popular TV personality. A production assistant who was on staff during Chase's guest presenting stint was recalled. He was forthright in his belief that he was more than just a fill-in. He was a glimpse into the future of the show. The longtime employees who had collaborated with Johnny thought it was really rude. Prior to going on air, Chase already had his troubles. According to reports, he stubbornly refused to listen to Carson's senior staff during rehearsals, and instead insisted on doing things his own. Rumor has it that he called the show's current format old-fashioned, and said that it required a facelift to appeal to a younger demographic. A writer who was present during Chase's week noted that this did not go over well because the workforce was loyal to Johnny. The most popular late-night program of all time was built in part by these individuals. This child, meanwhile, was assuring them that they had lost any sense of humor. Things didn't get much better after Chase's performance on air. Even if he didn't completely bomb, Carson's natural charisma shone through in his hosting. His attempts to blend aspects of his Saturday Night Live persona into the more conversational format of The Tonight Show were even more disastrous. The natural progression of the interviews was interrupted multiple times by his attempts at physical humor and pratfalls. The writer continued, guest would be making a serious point, and suddenly Chevy would fall out of his chair for no reason. It was jarring and threw off the rhythm completely. What sealed Chase's fate, however, was his behavior toward the show's staff. Multiple reports indicated that he was condescending to crew members, dismissive of producers' input, and generally created an unpleasant working environment. When Carson returned from vacation, he was reportedly inundated with complaints about Chase's attitude. Johnny was very protective of his team, noted a producer who worked on the show for over a decade. These were people who had been with him for years, and he valued their happiness and comfort. When he heard how Chevy had treated them, that was it. Chase was finished at The Tonight Show. Unlike some of our other entries, Chase's banishment wasn't immediately obvious to viewers. He simply never appeared on the program again, either as host or guest. When Chase's publicists would reach out about promoting his new films, they were politely but firmly told there were no available slots. A standard Hollywood rejection that everyone in the industry understood as a permanent no. The irony of Chase's situation was that he had actually been on Carson's radar as a potential successor years earlier. Before the guest hosting debacle, Carson had expressed admiration for Chase's work on SNL and reportedly considered him among the younger talents who might eventually take over The Tonight Show. That possibility evaporated entirely after Chase's week at the helm. Years later, Chase himself acknowledged the significance of being frozen out by Carson. In a 1990s interview, he admitted, "Not being welcome on Johnny's show definitely hurt my career. The inability to appear on the most popular talk show in the United States while marketing a film is problematic. When I was younger, I had a narcissistic attitude. The harm I was causing eluded me, so should it read starring or co-starring? Among my films since Heaven Can Wait, taking care of business is among the most enjoyable. What if I omitted a question? In the middle ground." Charles Grodin, number 7. After deadpan comedy bombed, Charles Grodin became a fan favorite thanks to his aggressive, caustic sense of humor, which he used in hits like Heaven Can Wait and The Heartbreak Kid. In 1973, he brought the same deadpan delivery and talent for making uncomfortable circumstances funny that had worked so well in movies to The Tonight Show. Still, Carson momentarily booted him off the show because of his embarrassing appearance. This persona that Grodin had created allowed him to come on. According to an on-air talent coordinator, the guest was a difficult arguing type. The issue was that he kept it a secret from everyone. None of the producers, the pre-in crew, or most crucially Carson himself. Johnny was caught quite unaware. There was an evident air of unease among viewers as the program started. Rather of starting off with a casual chat, Grodin jumped right into a challenge, asking Carson why he hadn't seen his most recent film or read his book. After Carson said he just didn't have the time, Grodin got increasingly nasty in his criticism of Carson's professionalism and preparation. An on-duty videographer that night recalls that the viewers were at a loss for words. Was this really stress? How much, if any? At first, not even we were certain. Individuals in the audience appeared to be staring at one another, perplexed and uneasy. Carson, a true expert of live television, saw right away that Grodin was acting, but he was stuck. There would be no humorous tension if he admitted it was a bit. Viewers might misunderstand his behavior as genuine rudeness toward a guest if he participated too enthusiastically. He tried to get out of this jam by acting calmly but playfully in response to Grodin's advances. Johnny was trapped, remarked a writer who was there that evening. There was no clear disaster as the segment ended, but Carson made his feelings known behind the scenes. He couldn't fully commit to the bit because he hadn't been prepared for it, but he couldn't shut it down without seeming like he couldn't take a joke. It was an impossible situation, and you could see his growing frustration beneath the professional smile. Being surprised was not something he had enjoyed. Reportedly, he expressed his preference to producers. Next time someone wants to come on and play a character, I'd like to know about it beforehand. Although not officially banned, Grodin was unable to get a return appearance for a number of years. The timetable was filled. They would tell his reps when they asked about advertising his new ventures, the Hollywood style of delicately expressing disinterest. The intriguing element of Grodin's story is that he did, in fact, return to The Tonight Show, but only after producers for Carson negotiated certain conditions. Carson was willing to play along with Grodin's combative role when he was invited back in the late 1970s, since both parties realized that it was now an established bit. A filmmaker who was involved during this time noted that the later Grodin appearances were among the show's most enjoyable parts. After Johnny had a better idea of what was going on, he could get ready and give it his all. Their simulated disputes quickly became a crowd favorite. Afterwards, Grodin admitted that he was mistaken about what had caused his brief exile. An important precedent was set for The Tonight Show by the Grodin incident, which he acknowledged in interviews by saying, "Johnny liked spontaneity, but he also liked to know the general direction an interview was going. I threw him into the deep end without warning and he wasn't happy about it." As for Carson, he should have been prepared for his approach. Guests who wished to disrupt the typical format of the discussion show were required to communicate with the producers beforehand. You could make an unforgettable impression by surprising Carson, but you could also lose any chance of receiving an invitation to return. Living up to my modesty, we are after all discussing Paris, aren't we? A gift was purchased by you and given to me. No way, how awful. B, the 8th number. You, Davis. Famous people from Hollywood who were too demanding. Having won 2 Oscars and racked up decades of great performances, Bette Davis was already Hollywood royalty when she made an appearance on The Tonight Show in 1972. Her position in cinematic history was solid, and her icon status was undeniable. However, her behavior was so demanding that Carson and his staff decided to end her tenure on the show after this one visit. Davis had an unusual list of demands and an entourage when he arrived. I thought of a production coordinator from the show. Extra lighting, green lighting of camera angles, prohibition of certain questions that Carson was not allowed to ask, and prohibition of any other guests from appearing on the show. Instead of a talk show guest, it felt more like interacting with royalty. The staff of The Tonight Show, who are used to accommodating celebrities, did their best to accommodate these requests. We set up some special lights. The restricted subjects were briefed to Carson, and the highly sought-after first guest role went to Davis. When asked why they couldn't cancel other scheduled guests, they cited the show's concept, which necessitated various portions. That made Davis very angry. The organizer went on. According to her, Katharine Hepburn would not be forced to share the limelight. Even before she was on air, it caused anxiety. At first glance, the interview between Carson and the Hollywood icon seemed to be your average cordial discussion. Despite the apparent friendliness of the discussion, Davis was actually causing major problems for the crew working on the set. She told the lighting director to make changes mid-interval, motioned for the camera operators to relocate, and even ordered Carson to step aside because he was miscapturing the light. During her interview, she was attempting to run the show, according to a camera operator who was there that night. Johnny managed to keep his growing annoyance hidden from the audience. He had no problem with visitors expressing preferences, but attempting to manipulate the production while live on TV was too much. A commercial break was the final straw. Upon their return from break, Davis reportedly voiced his disapproval of the segment's direction and proposed various adjustments. Carson calmly but firmly said, "Miss Davis, this is how we do the show. If that doesn't work for you, we can end the interview now." Davis finished the section professionally, but the damage had already been done. After her departure, Carson allegedly told his producer, "That's quite enough of Miss Davis, I think." She was then subtly put to the roster of guests who would not be extended another invitation, considering that the suspension was the result of more than just Davis's diva antics. Her case is all the more intriguing. Difficult people have been on The Tonight Show before. What he didn't like was her effort to take charge of the production in order to basically steer Carson's show. An on-air writer from that era mentioned that Johnny held Davis in the highest regard as an actor. If she had simply conducted the interview, he would have been able to endure her demands and attitude. However, she went too far when she began directing the camera crew's positions and requesting modifications to the lighting while the show was airing. Carson considered himself the master navigator, and he would have none. Not even B let him go. It is Davis's turn to drive. Going forward, The Tonight Show dealt with high-maintenance guests differently after the Davis incident. The production crew set more concrete limits about the kind of accommodations that may be made, and those that would cause problems for the program to run. After Davis, our policy became simple. We'll do everything we can to make you comfortable before the camera rolls. But once we're on air, it's Carson's show. These 8 stories show a side of Johnny Carson that viewers rarely saw during his 30 years as America's late-night companion. An expert in his field who sets high standards for himself, has strong limits, and remembers people who cross them. The genial, friendly MC was actually quite rigid about the format of his show, and had little patience for visitors who got in the way of his plans. If you want more videos, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching.